Hey guys, so I've just had my very first video directed specifically at me made by the one and only Comrade Schnitz, and if you're not aware of him, he's a cool YouTube channel which makes good memes and amazing vaporwave, or labor wave as he calls it, so I'd recommend checking out him. I'll leave the video that he made in the description below, but check out his other stuff too. So he's made a video critiquing Leninism and the idea of the centralized party, and so yeah, the title was like to Xexizy, or however you say my name. So he's been expecting a response, so that's what we're gonna do today. So let's dive into this video, have some fun.
I believe the inherent ideas of Leninism promote a sense of class elitism. The party having so much control over the state like it does in Leninism is a dangerous notion to begin with. It's raising a certain group of individuals above others based off their quote-unquote education and knowledge. It's a form of elitism and essentially creates a new class in charge of the state politically instead of economically. The class of the party. They have high positions of power based off their membership in said class of the party.
Okay, so he's claiming that those in the party are in a privileged elitist position above the working class, but let's take a read of State and Revolution, shall we? From the members of the commune downwards, the public services have to be done with workman wages. The privileged representation allowance of a high dignitaries of state disappeared along with high dignitaries of themselves. So apologies for some of the terrible pronunciation there, but yeah, that's a very important quote. Now the second very important quote that I wanted to refer to was, "We shall reduce the role of state officials to that of simply carrying out our instructions as responsible, revocable, modestly paid foremen and accountants, of course with the aid of technicians of all sorts, types and degrees." So, in no way does it ever imply that the party are above the working class, nor should they be. Neither does it say anything about the will of the party being above the will of the working class. The way I interpret it at least, it's almost saying that the will of the party is irrelevant when compared to what the working class wants. And also want to address this misconception that the party is always inherently made up of a select few elite individual intellectual philosopher kings. Those in the party are those who are best fit for the job, judged by the people themselves. And this is, we can say this because the party should, if it's an actual dictatorship of the proletariat, have things like recall at any time, just like the Paris Commune did. This is vital in making sure that the actual people in the party are staying true to what the workers want. So it's not based on, everyone has to give a list of the books they've read and whoever reads the most wins, right? It's based on what the actual people themselves want.
Essentially, the party sought to solidify their increasing control and centralize the government without the word democratic involved.
But Schnitz,
you may say,
the Soviet Union cannot be used as an example due to the conditions of the pre-existing Russian Empire. It was feudalistic, and the Soviet Union is going to have capitalist structures for successful socialism.
This argument is good, but for the economic policies of the Soviet Union, like the 5-year plan and state capitalist industrial organization. But it doesn't really explain the political abuses of the party and the failures of Soviet democracy.
Okay, so he makes this very interesting claim here that the political abuses can't be described with the economic conditions. Yes, they most certainly can. That's what a lot of Marxism is, that most things can be described, if not everything can be described with economic. I was actually planning on making a dedicated video for this topic, but you've kind of given me a really good opportunity to get into it here now anyway, so let's go. Now, after the 1917 revolution, there was always the plan to smash and replace the state apparatus with more proletarian state apparatus, and in a lot of cases in the industrialized cities in Russia, this happened, where you had people's militias as described by Lenin in his Letters from Afar, and you had functioning worker soviets for individual industries. It was probably the closest that Russia ever got to actual socialism before Lenin was forced to implement the NAP, so everyone and didn't starve. However, among these state apparatuses was the bureaucracy. Now, this was unfortunately still required for Russia's economy to function, as it transitioned into a more industrial one. The reason this bureaucracy couldn't be replaced with a more abstract proletarian bureaucracy, if there's such a thing, although for the record Zizek says there is because that there simply weren't enough able and educated proletarians to fill in the amount of roles required for this. Because again, Russia was an extremely illiterate country. So you ended up with having to keep around ex-Tsarist bureaucrats in order for your own country to function properly. To quote State and Revolution again, we can see this was always the intention. Abolishing the bureaucracy at once, everywhere and completely, is out of the question. It is a utopia. But to smash the old bureaucratic machine at once and begin immediately to construct a new one that will make possible the gradual abolition of all bureaucracy, this is not a utopia. It is the experience of the commune and direct and immediate tasks of the revolutionary proletariat. Of course though, this was the intent while the expectation was still that Russia would have outside support from other proletarian revolutions like Germany. It was only when all of these failed that it became apparent that Russia couldn't make this new proletarian bureaucracy. After Lenin's death, you were left with two conflicting interests: the interests of the bureaucracy and the interests of the proletariat. Stalin was able to rise to power because he decided to be the figurehead of the bureaucracy, and he actually admits this in his own journals. The thing is though, this was destined to happen, no matter who was in power. Had Lenin stayed alive and in power, then the exact same criticisms that were given to Stalin would have been attributed to Lenin. The same thing would have happened with Trotsky, the same thing would have happened with even your fucking mother. You get my point. Now, as a disclaimer, this is not some abstract form of Stalin did nothing wrong. He did plenty of things wrong which were separate from choosing the winning side in a power struggle that was bound to happen. But this is rather just pointing out how Russia was doomed to walk this path. So this is how the economic conditions of Russia explain why the political sides played out like they did. Due to the economic conditions, democracy could simply not survive. Had the Russian Revolution been stable enough to survive without keeping around the ex-Tsarist bureaucracy, then it would have been able to retain their democracy and arguably even reach socialism after their industrialization had finished. I also want to throw in there that the Paris Commune and brief periods of Lenin in the industrialized cities of Russia are working examples of the centralized democratic party. This is why saying it doesn't hold up in practice makes no sense when even Engels himself was pointing to the Paris Commune, which was centralized as a working dictatorship of the proletariat.
There are examples of the democratic centralist and Leninist model being applied and failing in communist parties and movements in the Western world. The new communist movement was a Mao-inspired collection of communist groups in the 1960s and 1980s in the United States, the most capitalist of the capitalists. These groups followed the democratic centralist / Lenin-inspired model, and they faced the same issues as the Soviet Union and Red China. And I quote here from an article on the new communist movement. All sections of the new communist movement drew heavily on the selections from Mao when trying to define democratic centralism, especially his concise structure that 1. The individual is subordinate to the organization, 2. The minority is subordinate to the majority, 3. The lower level is subordinate to the higher level, and 4. The entire membership is subordinate to the central committee.
Okay, now you've given an example of parties that have tried to use the same democratic process and fall into the same problems that the USSR did, trying to point out how this is inherent. But if we take a look at the actual things that you said in the article that you're quoting from, this doesn't really sound like a dictatorship of the proletariat in the slightest. What this essentially boils down to is the party is right, the worker must follow what the party says. How in any way does this relate back to what I was saying at the start of the video about how the party is a tool used by the working class to enact its will? I mean, I don't know how well this matches up with Maoism, which was intended for a third world populace in the first place, but at the very least I'd say it is in no way related to actual Leninism. But thanks for making this video, Schnitz, because it's nice to see well constructed original arguments even if I don't agree with them. I'd like to see more of this from you and other YouTubers in the future. For now guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you all next time.